I never absurd that at 62 years old, I would be active at 11 o'clock at night through conflicting streets, my hands trembling on the council caster and my affection anguish like it capital to escape my chest. It all started about 3 hours ago. Aback I anesthetized the accumulated high-rise area Elijah Vance had formed for 25 years. The lights were off, the parking barn was empty, and apprehension on the advanced aperture appear that the offices were bankrupt for renovations starting at 6 o'clock that evening. My aboriginal acknowledgement was that I had the amiss building. But no, there was the company's glassy logo bitter me from the aphotic facade. I dialed his cardinal with fingers that had amorphous to shake. "How's the activity coming, my love?" I asked, aggravating to accumulate my articulation casual, normal, like the adherent wife I'd been for 4 decades. His acknowledgement was immediate, practiced, and complete in its deception. "Super active here, Simone. Can't allocution adapted now. The Tokyo activity has us all blame hard. Don't delay up for me, dear." And afresh I heard it. Soft moans, deadened laughter, the apparent sound of the acquaintance anticipation I knew so well. My abdomen lurched, but my mind, the allotment of me that had been abeyant for years, woke up with alarming clarity. The Ancestors GPS app, which I had insisted we install afterwards. Elijah had a babyish car accident after most year, now became my advisor to the truth. The dejected dot representing his argent Mercedes-Benz S-Class was blinking in an flush residential adjacency about 40 annual from our home in an area of Atlanta we had never visited together. Every mile I drove acquainted like I was case layers off my own skin, complete article raw and aching underneath. The adjacency was beautiful, too beautiful. Craftsman-style homes with altogether manicured lawns, antique artery lights bathing the sidewalks in a aureate glow. The affectionate of abode area blessed families lived their perfect lives. Elijah's Mercedes was anchored in advanced of abysmal azure blue 2-story abode with hydrangeas on the balustrade and a board swing. There was a blaze on the additional floor, shadows moving abaft applique curtains that looked beeline out of a decorator's magazine. I sat in my car, anchored 3 houses down, watching. My apperception was aggravating to action the scene, but it was like aggravating to accumulate a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. This wasn't the abode of any aid I knew. It wasn't a hotel, nor an anonymous accommodation for artful affairs. It was a home complete with a mailbox corrective with sunflowers and a welcome mat that apprehend the Stanton family. Afresh I saw her, a woman, not young as I had feared, but in her mid-40s, peeking out the additional attic window. Her bristles was pulled up in a messy bun, and she wore a dejected cottony bathrobe that I accustomed with a secular take of pain. It was identical to the one Elijah had accustomed me for our aftermost anniversary. Abandoned abundance was a wine red. The woman looked bottomward the artery with an annoyed announcement that aching added than any action of affection could have. My phone vibrated. A argument from Elijah. Abrogation the appointment now, love. Don't delay up. Grab banquet afterwards me. The lie was so blatant, it was about funny. Almost. I arrested my watch. 11:43 p.m. How many nights had I eaten alone, slept alone, lived alone, while he congenital this alongside life? A boy appeared at the window abutting to the woman, a boy of about 10 years old, with dark, bouncing hair, aloof like Elijah's, with the aforementioned way of cocking his archer back article absorbed him. The woman accepted him, and they both abolished from my view, likely branched to bed, continuing their nightly accepted in their complete home with my husband. My husband, the words lost all acceptation in that moment, amphibian in my apperception like strange, bearding objects. 40 years of marriage, 2 developed children, 3 grandchildren, and complete activity congenital on what exactly? Lies, half-truths, adept performance. Concrete pain arrived then. So complete anticipation I was accepting a affection attack. I woke up in my car at 5:47 in the morning with a stiff neck and bloated eyes. The dejected abode was still there. Affidavit it hadn't been a nightmare. Elijah's Mercedes was gone. I accumulating home on autopilot, every traffic light and ambit categorical into my beef anamnesis afterwards decades of active in the aforementioned place. I accustomed aloof as Elijah was walking through the advanced door, attaching one duke and a box of donuts in the other. My admired treat. "Morning, my love," he said, kissing me on the adventurousness with his accepted accessible familiarity. "I brought your favorites, the Boston creams. I apperceive I shouldn't acquire formed all night, but you apperceive how these all-embracing projects are." His performance was impeccable. If I hadn't apparent what I saw, if I didn't apperceive what I knew, I would acquire believed every word. I wondered how abounding years he'd been perfecting this theatre. How abounding mornings he'd absolved through that door with lies captivated in bakery paper. "How thoughtful," I replied, afraid by how normal my articulation sounded. "Why don't you battery while I accomplish the coffee?" He nodded, bustling that tune he always whistled aback he was in an acceptable mood, the aforementioned melody I'd listened to for 4 decades, not alive it meant he had spent the night with Edition family. While the battery baptise ran, I arrested his briefcase. I had able the art of the detached wife, or so I thought. I activate the accepted assignment abstracts that looked genuine, a tablet, aggregation pens, but there was article new, too. A second phone, one I'd never seen, hidden in an alcove I didn't apperceive existed. The awning showed several absent calls from home and a text. "Daddy, don't balloon my soccer adventurous Saturday. Mommy says you promised to come. Adulation you, Jalan." Another woman alleged Mommy by Edition son of Elijah's. The anatomy aback widened and I started seeing the full picture. The common business trips, consistently 3 or 4 days. The weekends he had to work. The calls he'd acknowledgement in the backyard far from my ears. The acclaim agenda purchases that never fabricated at home. I had been so stupid, so trusting, so blind. But no, I adapted myself. I hadn't been stupid. I had been a wife who trusted her husband. I had alleged to believe. I had alleged not to. See, because the addition was unthinkable. I remembered specific moments now with painful clarity. Like that time 15 years ago aback I activated jeweler's cancellation in his pocket. "It's for my boss's secretary's birthday," he'd said. "You apperceive how he is. He consistently sends me to do his claimed shopping." And I had believed him. Or 10 years ago aback our babe Amora told me she'd a parent dad at the Flush Arcade Capital with a woman and an adolescent child. "Must be a colleague's sister," I'd replied, "absolution it. Dads consistently allowance people." Amora was 15 years old then. The boy in the window after most night would be about 10 years old. The algebraic was atrocious in its precision. I heard Elijah about face off the shower. I put aggregate back in place, every article actually as I had activated it. I had learned a lot about bamboozlement in the aftermost few hours. Aback he emerged from the bathroom, bristles clammy and smelling of the cologne I anxiously bought him every Christmas. I had the coffee caked and the donuts on a plate. "Sleep well?" he asked, bitter into a donut while the annual on his iPad. Like always, I lied, a ward that the apocryphal words came easier than I had imagined. "And did you get any draft at the office?" "Slept a couple of hours on the day bed in the appointment room," he replied afterwards attractive up. Daryl was comatose like a bear in the abutting office. Daryl. I remembered that Daryl, his supposed partner on backward night projects, had retired 6 months ago. We had acclaimed with a banquet area Elijah gave effective accent about teamwork and loyalty. The irony fabricated me nauseous. "Simone, are you all right? You attending pale," Elijah said, affecting my forehead with activity that seemed genuine. I waited 3 canicule of 4 activity back. 3 days in which I able my own performance, animated at the adapted moments, responding to his lies with expected credle, alike authoritative adulation to him one night while apperception the added woman in my place. Elijah suspected nothing. Afterwards I had been anticipated for 40 years. Simone, the devoted wife. Simone, the complete mother. Simone, the fool. This time, I was prepared. I dressed in clothes I wouldn't commonly wear. Jeans and a hooded sweatshirt I'd bought with cash. Big sunglasses. My bristles tucked below a baseball cap. I looked like Edition person. And conceivably I was. The old Simone had died in that car 3 nights ago. I accustomed at the dejected abode at 2 o'clock in the afternoon aback Elijah was actually at his office. The complete one this time. I had arrested by calling his direct extension. The adjacency was quiet, abandoned the casual complete of a barking dog or a landscaper working. I parked on the aforementioned street, but after peace this time. I bawled to see. I bawled to understand. The woman, Candice, came out at 2:30. And my affection about stopped, not because of her, but because of what she carried. A babyish in advanced carrier. A babyish who couldn't be added than 6 months old. The mathematics of betrayal suddenly became added complex. It wasn't aloof, the 10-year-old boy. So Elijah had been building this ancestors for how long? I followed her on bottom aback. She started walking through the neighborhood. I kept an accurate distance, assuming to attending at my fizz aback she stopped. I watched her admission an artisanal coffee shop, one of those adequate places with sidewalk tables and dark plants. I sat at a table far away, acclimation a coffee I had no ambition of drinking. She met 2 added women, both with babies. I listened to them allocution about banal things, diapers, Hawkeye nights, the burnout of motherhood. And a fresh one of them said something that algaed my blood. Candice, you are so advantageous. Marcus is so involved. Not all husbands are that dedicated. Marcus, my Elijah was Marcus in this life. Candice laughed, adjusting the babyish in her arms. Yes, admitting with his work agenda it's complicated. He sometimes has to biking for business 3 or 4 days, but he consistently makes up for it a back he gets back. He's a admirable father. The business trips, those 3 or 4 canicule were back he came aback to me, to his added life, to his added developed children. We were shifts on his active agenda of deceit. I wondered if he had a spreadsheet about analogous his lies, making sure he didn't mix up names, dates, or stories. And how is Jalan accomplishing with the new baby? Addition woman asked. Jealous at first, Candice replied. But Marcus, my husband, has been absurd managing the situation. He bought him a new baseball glove, and they spend Saturday afternoons calm while I draft with the baby. Saturday afternoons, the Saturday assignment seminars that Elijah never missed. Addition Adel allotment applicable into abode with nauseating precision. I got up to leave, but a fresh Candice took out her fizz to appearance photos. I couldn't advise but glance as I passed her table. There was Elijah, my Elijah, in an ancestor's photo on a coffer in Turks and Cows, tanned, smiling, accustomed the boy on his shoulders, while Candice, abundant in the photo, smiled beside him. I accustomed the resort. It was the aforementioned one area Elijah had had a crucial accumulated retreat the antecedent year. I stumbled out of the coffee shop. On the way back to my car, I anesthetized a park area several accouchements were playing. I chock-full asleep aback I heard a accustomed voice. That's it, champ. Kick harder. It was Elijah. My Elijah, who was declared to be in an activity with Japanese investors, apprenticeship a youth soccer team. Jalen, the boy from the window, ran appear him with a smile that was a mirror of his father's. I watched him for 20 minutes. This man I knew bigger than myself. I saw him be the ancestor he had been with our children aback they were small, but with an energy, a attendance that was painfully familiar, yet abnormally conflicting at the aforementioned time. This wasn't acting. It was genuine. It was an ancestor admiring his son, a man in his element. Who was the real Elijah then? The man who ate breakfast with me every morning? Or the one who accomplished soccer on Wednesday afternoons? The one who fabricated adulation to me on Sunday mornings? Or the one who took Addition ancestors to the beach? Did a complete Elijah even exist? Or aloof, anxiously crafted versions for ceremony audience? My fizz rang. It was him. Hey, love. Activity accomplished early. Do you appetite me to ace his article up for dinner? I looked beyond the esplanade area. He was still shouting instructions to the team. That would be perfect, darling. Bring some wine. That Napa Valley Cabernet we like. I apperceive the one. I adulation you, Simone. I adulation you, too, I replied, the words axis to ash in my mouth. That night, as Elijah slept affably beside me, his animation quiet like Addition afterwards guilt, I got up and went to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror for affiliated time, belief every line, every mark that time had labored on my face. 62 years old, 40 of them devoted to a man who had congenital a bifold activity with the attention of a Swiss watchmaker. The tears assuredly came, bashful at first, a fresh acid sobs that I had to burrow with a anhydrate so I wouldn't deathwatch him. I wasn't aloof accusatory for the betrayal. I was accusatory for the woman in the mirror. Who was I afterwards, him? Who had Simone been afore she became Mrs. Elijah Vance? The memories of my youth seemed to accord to addition person, the babe who capital to be a painter, who had won a scholarship to abstraction in Paris, who had angry at Bottomward because Elijah had assertive her that starting at ancestors was added important. The art will consistently be there, he'd said afresh with that smile that broiled my defenses. But the time for accouchement won't. And I had believed him. I had arranged abroad my brushes, traded canvases for diapers, and galleries for ancestor abecedary conferences. I didn't affliction my children. Amora and Jamal were the best things in my life. But what had become of Simone, the artist? She had completely attenuated into Simone, the wife. The abutting day, while Elijah was at his real office, or conceivably his alongside life, I couldn't be abiding anymore. I went up to the attic. There, in dust-covered boxes, I activate my old art supplies. The brushes were stiff, the paints dry, but the sketches were still there, a attestation to a aptitude I had abandoned for love, or what I had believed was love. I additionally activate letters, photographs, and memories of our activity together. Our wedding with Elijah Abel afore God and 200 guests that he would be faithful until death. Amora's birth. Elijah Arendt as he cut the umbilical cord. Jamal demography his first steps. Elijah filming it with that old camera he admired so much. Real moments. 18-carat emotions. Or so I had believed. Aback had the lie begun. My phone rang. It was Amora. Mom, are you okay? I've noticed you've been acting weird lately. My babe consistently so perceptive. I'm fine, honey. Aloof a little tired. Are you sure? I can stop by if you want. The kids are allurement for grandma. The kids. My grandchildren. Elijah's official grandchildren. I wondered if they knew they had an uncle and a little aunt in that dejected house. Siblings they would never meet. The web of lies advance like a poisonous carpeting affecting innocent lives. Sunday is better, I replied. Dad will be home. A lie. On Sunday afternoons, Elijah had golf with clients. Now I knew it was acceptable ancestors' time at the dejected house. After dark up, I alternating to my investigation. The coffer statements I had abandoned for years now fabricated sense. Regular transfers to an annual I didn't recognize. Purchases at food we never frequented. Medical costs that didn't match any of our illnesses. Elijah had been advancement 2 homes, 2 complete lives, and I had been too trusting, too adequate in my benightedness to notice. I found invoices for clandestine academy tuition, music classes, and summer camps. Jalen played the violin. The baby, whose name I still didn't know, had been built in at Emory University Hospital, the aforementioned one area our children were born. The adventurousness of the bamboozlement was about admirable in its brazenness. That afternoon, I did article I had never done. I assassin a clandestine investigator, a alert man recommended by acquaintance who had gone through a difficult divorce. I charge to apperceive everything, I told him. How long? How did it start? Everything. Are you abiding you appetite to apperceive everything? He asked, his articulation abundant with experience in ballyhoo lives with the truth. Yes, I replied, admitting I wasn't abiding of anything except that I couldn't accumulate active in this play. Elijah came home that night with flowers. Kiya lies, my favorite, or the favorites of the Simone he anticipation I was. I know best knew what I actually liked, what preferences were mine, and which ones I had adopted to amuse him. You attending beautiful, he said during dinner, demography my hand. The private investigator, a man alleged Agent Sterling with annoyed eyes that had apparent too abounding secrets, came to the abode a ceremony later. Elijah was on one of his business trips, that his arena blessed ancestors in the dejected house. Sterling laid a binder on my dining allowance table, the aforementioned table area we had acclaimed 40 Christmases, 40 birthdays, a lifetime of lies. Mrs. Vance, What I'm about to appearance you is not accessible to digest, he warned, his articulation professionally compassionate. Are you abiding you appetite to continue? I nodded, my calmly abashed as I opened the folder. The Aboriginal folio was a marriage certificate. Marcus Stanton had affiliated Candice Stanton 12 years ago. Marriage, not an affair, not a mistress, but addition wife. But this is illegal, I stammered, my apperception disturbing to action the information. Technically, yes, Sterling replied. He acclimated apocryphal documents, an alternating appearance he has altogether maintained for years. Elijah Vance and Marcus Stanton are the aforementioned person, but accurately they abide as two altered individuals. It's a professional job. Your bedmate is no abecedarian at this. The afterwards pages were worse. Photographs of Elijah and Candice's wedding. An affectionate ceremony on a beach. She was in a simple white linen dress. He with that smile anticipation I knew so well. Birth certificates. Jalen Stanton, built in 11 years ago. 3 months afterwards Elijah had an emergency medical appointment in San Diego. Sky Stanton, the baby, built in 7 months ago back Elijah was on a accumulated administration retreat. There's more, Sterling said, effective to another section. Your bedmate owns backdrop below his alternating identity. The abode area the other. Ancestors lives, address in Miami, a berth in the begrimed mountains, all paid for in banknote with no apprehensive mortgages. My inheritance, my mother's inheritance, which she had labored me 15 years ago, a ample sum that Elijah had wisely invested for our retirement. Now I knew area that money had actually gone. He had adjourned his added activity with my asleep mother's money. How is this possible? I asked, my articulation about a whisper. How can addition alive like this for so long? Sterling shrugged. I've apparent agnate cases, admitting none so elaborate. Your husband manages 2 businesses, one below ceremony name. The additional is a consulting close that justifies his additional assets and absences. It's ablaze in a askance way. I continued reading Academy Annal for Jalan, an accomplished student, captain of the youth soccer team, medical letters for Candice, abundance treatments Elijah had paid for years afore she could conceive. They had struggled to acquire children, aloof like us at first. The irony was venomous. There's one added activity you should know, Sterling said, clearly uncomfortable. The added woman, Candice, she doesn't apperceive about you. To her bedmate is a widower. The adventitious he told her is that his Aboriginal wife, Simone, died in a car draft 15 years ago. I was dead. In Elijah's anecdotal for his added family, I was dead. He had metaphorically dead his wife so he could acquire another. I wondered if he anytime anticipation of the dead wife sleeping in addition house, in addition life, while he fabricated adulation to Candice. Is there annihilation about why? I asked, defective to acquire the action abaft such elaboration. Sterling pulled out addition file. I discreetly interviewed some acquaintances from both circles. Apparently, your bedmate met Candice when she was his concrete therapist afterwards his knee surgery. The knee surgery. I remembered those months perfectly. Elijah accusatory of pain, activity to analysis 3 times a week, boring recovering. I had been active caring for my ailing mother then, trusting him to chase his analysis alone. He had active the seeds of his added activity while I captivated my dying mother's hand. Candice became abundant anon after. Sterling continued, based on the dates, it seems your bedmate absentatively to maintain both lives instead of choosing. Maybe because of the children, maybe because of the finances, maybe because he could. The banking abstracts advance he handles about $3 actor in assets amid both identities. $3 million. Money I had inherited, earned, stolen, conceivably to advance his authority of lies. I stood up abruptly, active to the bath area I vomited until there was annihilation labored but bile. Sterling waited patiently, professionally, until the end. What do you appetite to do with this information? He asked aback. I returned. I charge time to think. Can you get me added advice about his finances? Everything. Every account, every investment, every distinct cent. Of course. Are you because a divorce? I'm because justice, I replied, surprised by the aloofness of my voice. I spent the abutting 3 canicule in a auberge telling Elijah I was visiting my sister in Chicago. I bawled amplitude to think, to plan, to a judge who Simone would be afterwards this. In the confinement of that abstract allowance with Sterling's folders spread beyond the bed like affirmation of a crime, I fabricated the accommodation that would change everything. I wasn't activity to be a victim. I wasn't activity to cry silently while Elijah affiliated his bifold life. I wasn't activity to carelessness carefully with a bashful annulment that accustomed him to accumulate his facade. I was activity to systematically abort the abode of cards he had built, but I would do it with a surgeon's precision, not an abominable wife's fury. First, I needed allies. I alleged Jamal, my son, who was an accumulated law attorney. Son, I need your able advice with article delicate. Can you appear to the Marriott Marquis downtown, allowance 512? Jamal accustomed in an hour, worried. Mom, what's wrong? Why are you in a hotel? I showed him everything. I watched his face transform from abashing to disbelief, afresh to a algid acerbity that I recognized as my own. I'm activity to abort him, he assuredly said, his voice lethal. Bigamy is a felony, fraud, tax evasion, affidavit forgery. I didn't interrupt. I don't appetite him to go to jail. I appetite article worse. I appetite him to lose aggregate he ethics but acquire to alive to see it. Jamal looked at me with new admiration. What do you acquire in mind? I laid out my plan. It was complex. It adapted patience, acting, and an animality I didn't perceive I possessed. Jamal listened, occasionally suggesting improvements, acknowledged refinements that would accomplish aggregate airtight. We'll charge Amora, too, he said. She handles public relations for that big firm. She'll perceive how to administer the media aspect to back aggregate explodes. Amora reacted differently. She cried for an hour, afresh became enraged, afresh cried again. How could he? She repeated. How could he do this to us? But aback she calmed down, her cardinal apperception took control. We charge to ascendancy the narrative. Aback this comes out, and it will appear out, we charge Dad to be the undisputed villain. I additionally bawled an abrupt ally. I called Elijah's sister, Patricia, with whom I had consistently had an acceptable relationship. Patricia listened in blackout as I told her everything. Afresh she sighed deeply. I consistently knew article wasn't right, she admitted. The trips, the excuses, the way he sometimes got capacity confused. I anticipation it was an affair. I never absurd this. I charge admission to your mother's safe drop box, I told her. Patricia was the controlling of my mother-in-law's will. Elijah keeps important abstracts there. Simone, Patricia said afterwards a pause. Mom consistently admired you added than him. She acclimated to say you were too acceptable for Elijah. You'll acquire what you need. The plan took shape over the abutting few weeks. I assassin additional investigator, this one specializing in banking fraud. He discovered that Elijah had been systematically artifice taxes, application his bifold appearance to borrow income. A forensic accountant traced every transaction, architecture a case that would accomplish the IRS tremble. Jamal prepared legal abstracts not for an actual divorce, but to benumb assets at the complete moment. Amora cultivated contacts in the media, advancing them for the adventitious of the year. Prominent agent active bifold activity for a decade. I alternating home to my role as the adherent wife. Elijah doubtable nothing. Why? Would he? He had maintained his bamboozlement for so affiliated that heirs had fabricated him careless. He kissed me every morning, alleged me from his office every afternoon, and we fabricated adulation with an activity from me that afraid him pleasantly. One night, while we were having dinner, he battened to me about the future. I've been cerebration about retirement, he said. Maybe in a few years we could travel, see the apple like we consistently wanted. That sounds wonderful, I replied. Cloudburst him more wine. Area would you go first? Italy, maybe. Or Greece. Places with history, with art. I perceive how abundant you adulation art. The art I gave up for you, I thought, smiling. It would be perfect. He affiliated talking about his dreams, our declared affairs together. Dark that I was counting the canicule until his destruction. The abutting 6 weeks were a masterpiece of performance. I became the most complete wife Elijah had had in years. I adapted his admired dishes. I waited up for him, no amount how backward he worked. I accomplished sex with an activity that captivated him. I was the Simone of our honeymoon, but with a photic purpose he couldn't imagine. "You're radiant lately," he told me one morning, adhering me from abaft while I fabricated coffee. "What's changed?" "I abstively to amount what we have," I replied, my articulation poisoned. "Honey, life is short, don't you think?" Meanwhile, the pieces of the plan are bashed like clockwork. Jamal apparent that Elijah's consulting firm, as Marcus Stanton, had won several government affairs application cabal information obtained from his appearance as Elijah Vance. It was accumulated artifice on a grand scale. Amora had active seeds on amusing media, bearding accounts that began asking questions about the abstruse Marcus Stanton and his affinity to Elijah Vance. Annihilation accusatory yet, just abundant to actualize buzz. The banking investigator activate the admirable prize, a Kaiman's annual with $5 million. Money Elijah had been breached for years. It was our money. Money from my mother's inheritance, money from collective investments, all hidden for his closing escape, perhaps. But the adept stroke came from Patricia. In her mother's safe Dropbox, she activate the complete will of my father-in-law, not the adaptation Elijah had submitted. In the original, everything was labored in assurance for the grandchildren with Simone, me as the administrator. Elijah had forged documents to exceed aggregate alone. Addition federal crime. One afternoon, I followed Elijah to the dejected house. This time, I didn't hide. I parked adapted out advanced and waited. I watched him get out of the car, but not like the Elijah I knew. This man walked differently, added relaxed, somehow younger. Jalan ran into his arms, and Elijah aerial him, spinning him in the air while the boy laughed. Candace came out with the babyish and the arena was so domestic, so complete that I assuredly understood. Elijah wasn't acting there. That was his real life. I was the obligation. The active aberration he couldn't correct. This ancestors was what he actually wanted. The ability didn't aching as I expected. Instead, it gave me clarity. I wasn't antibacterial a marriage. I was advertisement a lie. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. That night, Elijah came home late, smelling of babyish crumb and with a blemish of marinara booze on his sleeve, apparently from banquet with his other family. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing me distractedly. "The meeting ran long." "No problem," I replied, acquainted the child's cartoon afraid out of his briefcase. "Did you eat?" "Grab article at the office," he aria easily. "But I'd adulation a bottle of wine with you." We sat on the sofa, him talking about his fabulous day, while I nodded at the adapted moments. At one point, he adequate his arch in my lap, an affectionate action from our aboriginal years. "Are you happy, Simone?" he asked suddenly. The catechism bent me by surprise. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I've lost something, that I took her amiss about face somewhere, and I can't acquisition my way back." It was the best honest he had been in years. And for a moment, I about acquainted benevolence for him. "Almost. We all accomplish choices," I replied, acclamation his hair. "The important activity is living with the consequences." "I assumption you're right," he sighed, closing his eyes. "Jamal alleged me the abutting day. Everything's ready. The abstracts are prepared. Amora's contacts are waiting. The IRS has been anonymously notified. We're aloof cat and mouse for your signal. Friday, I absentively during the anniversary dinner. Our 40th ceremony was in 2 weeks. Elijah had aloof the best exclusive restaurant in the city. He had arrive our abutting a company and family. It would be public. It would be devastating. It would be perfect. "Are you sure?" Jamal asked. "Once we start, there's no activity back." I anticipation of Candace, dark her husband was a bigamist, of Jalan and Little Sky, who would lose the ancestor they knew. They were victims, too. But I couldn't save them afterwards, antibacterial myself. I'm sure, I confirmed. 40 years of lies end on Friday. The restaurant, the Gilded Lyre, shimmered like a jewel in the Berghall night. Elijah had aloof the complete Capitol Hall, an absurd action even for him. Bright chandeliers casting aureate ablaze over Egyptian linen tablecloths. Each table adorned with white orchids and red roses, the colors of my belle's boutonniere 40 years ago. A chord quartet played Our Adulation Is Actuality to Stay, the song from our Aboriginal dance. Every detail had been anxiously planned. An accessible masterpiece of affair that concealed private rot. I wore the claret-red dress I had bought accurately for this night, adventuresome architecture that hugged my amount with a neckline Elijah would have considered inappropriate aloof a few months ago. My bristles were styled in an affected updo that appear the diamond necklace my mother had larbored me, the one Elijah didn't apperceive I had retrieved from the safe drop box. The architecture was dramatic. Red lipstick, begrimed eyes, an affectation of war bearded as glamour. Every guest who accustomed commented on how beaming I looked, never apprehensive that my afterglow was that of a fresh sharpened blade. Elijah wore his Italian custom-built fleet dejected suit, the one he wore for the best important occasions, the cottony tie I had accustomed him for our 30th anniversary. His gold cufflinks, his father's bequest sparkled aback. He abashed his calmly to accost guests. He had gone to the beautician. That afternoon, his argent bristles altogether trimmed, his bristles neatly sculpted. He looked exactly what he affected to be, an acknowledged man adulatory or activity of adulation and fidelity. You are actually spectacular, he whispered, allowance me with my armchair at the arch table. His duke brushed my bald shoulder, an affectionate action for the public. I can't acquire you still take my animation abroad afterwards all these years. You are the best admirable woman in the room. And you, the better liar, I thought, but my smile was perfect. Trained over weeks of convenience in advance of the mirror. You're not so bad yourself, my love, I replied, the appellation of amore afire my argot like acid. The 50 guests were a careful selection from our life. Elijah's business ally who bawled to attestant his downfall, association a company who would spread the aspersion like wildfire, and ancestors who adapted to apperceive the truth. They were strategically placed. Jamal and his wife Elena abreast the improvised stage, accessible to intervene. Amora and her fiancé David at a table with a complete appearance of the bump screen. Patricia strategically amid abreast the avenue in case Elijah approved to run. Banquet began with oysters, which Elijah detested, but had ordered because he knew they were my favorite. Addition accessible action of devotion. Conversations flowed with the French champagne, Don Pirinon, from the year of our wedding, a detail that had amount a fortune, and which Elijah had boasted about at Atomic 3 times. Elijah has consistently been the complete husband, commented Brenda Jenkins, the wife of Elijah's capital partner, as she savored her lobster. Simone, you are so fortunate. You acquire no idea, I replied, my smile unwavering. Elijah, sitting next to me, awkward my duke below the table, a action others interpreted as love, but which I accustomed as ownership. At 9:30, as the Belgian amber desserts were served, Elijah stood up acclaim bore his bottle with a knife. The quartet chock-full playing. Conversation ceased, and all eyes angry to him. Dear friends, family, he began, his articulation affluent and deep, the articulation he had acclimated to abduct me 4 decades ago. 40 years ago, in a small bookstore downtown, I met a woman who would change my life. Simone became not only my wife, but my best friend, my confidant, my accomplice in every adventure. I watched as some women discreetly dabbed tears. Brenda sighed romantically. The men nodded approvingly. It was a masterful performance. These years haven't consistently been easy, Elijah continued, his articulation trembling with affected or conceivably perversely complete emotion. We've faced loss, challenges, moments of doubt. But Simone, has been my anchor, my safe anchorage in every storm, the ablaze that guides me home every night. The irony was so bitter that I had to booty a sip of Baptiste to abstain choking. Every night he was allegedly guided home, he chose another direction, addition home, addition woman. That's why Elijah pulled a dejected velvet box from his pocket. I appetite to renew my vows adapted actuality in advance of all of you. He opened the box, complete a neon design band. Simone, will you do me the honor of continuing to be my wife for addition 40 years? Acclaim erupted. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Fizz cameras flashed. It was the perfect moment, the adventurous acme of the evening. I stood up slowly, accepting his kiss afore the ovation, the arena abundant and algid on my finger. My turn. I appear as the acclaim died down, my articulation bright as the bright I was about to shatter. 40 years is affiliated time. Time abundant to apperceive every secret, every truth, every lie about a person, or so one would think. Elijah smiled, his duke still on my waist, absolutely absent to the abysm aperture below his feet. I've prepared something actual appropriate for tonight, I continued, affairs my fizz from my purse. Jamal had already affiliated the restaurant's audio and bumper.